1 minute. If you can hurry up, get around your group if you haven't gotten around yet, or you can wrap up the comments that you're on. 1 minute. All right. If you can help each other. I'm very excited when it's difficult for a room to quiet down. It means there's a lot of good conversation going on. And it's like I'd rather talk to each other than hear what she has to say. So this is great. So this is maybe a little slow getting started. Some of you will be used to this, some of you will be new, but we're going to be, this is not a conversation among somebody up front and a few of you who happen to be on the advisory committee. Hopefully this is as much a conversation between 300 people as we can have. So let's hear a little bit about what some of you talked about at your tables. We'll start with the mic runners around the room. We've got 4 mics around the room. I'm going to ask you to start with who'd like to start and tell us a little bit about why you're here, why your table talked about being here. You might be quiet, but again, I will wait through that socially awkward silence, and one of you will become so uncomfortable, you will raise your hand. All right, why are you here? Who'd like to share that with us? Great. In the back. Hello. And raise your hands, we'll get mics to you, so you don't have to wait. You can raise your hands. We've got mics running in 4 sections.
My name is Omar, I'm from Southwestern College. We talked about coming here to hear ideas that we can bring back to our colleges. I mentioned that every time I go to a meeting or a conference, I always hear something, a practice or some belief that I can take to my job. And then other people mentioned that we came here to intentionally talk about leadership versus a lot of times we just briefly talk about it, but here we're very, very intentional. And then someone mentioned also empathy, right? Thank you.
So empathy has something to do with leadership.
Yes.
That's great. All right. Okay, I'm just going to come off the stage. Be careful, I'm headed your way. So right in this area. Great. We've got a hand right over there.
Okay, hello. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Daniel Garcia. I'm current Associate Students Vice President from San Antonio College. In our table, we discuss about different topics, different reasons. One of us, from my perspective, is about to learn about leadership, to being able to bring that to the students, to being able to understand what really leadership is. Additionally, the different points of view, change in leadership positions, administration changes, or leadership administration in legislative level. So basically, we came here together to learn, to be able to make a change on campus.
Yeah, nice. Some big changes. Great. So how do we learn together to change? How do we understand what change leadership is? How do we think about leadership and empathy? So I'm walking your way. Get ready. From this area. Let's bring in a mic. Great. Right here. And then back there.
I could scream out loud enough. I think if we actually can create and see that vision, then we can follow the vision. But if we can't, then our students can't either.
So there's a mutual visioning piece here, creating some shared language and idea about where we're headed.
Yeah, but of course, keeping respectful of different districts and their own relative problems and journeys, but to share our knowledge and also even technology, because we're going to be so dependent on that, especially to report to the state.
Right. And where does, this is a kind of a prompting question maybe, does leadership happen within my area? Does it happen within my college? What is my role as a leader within what we might call the system of everybody in this room? And how do you think of yourself at multiple levels at exactly the same time? Back here? Regina?
Hi, I'm Regina Stanbeck-Stroud. I'm the president of Skyline College. We had a conversation at this table, and many people talked about the opportunity to gather information, take information back to their campuses, be able to use it to make, to implement some things and to make a difference in the ways in which they approach it. And I'd like to add to that, that I hope, the reason that I am particularly here is that I'm interested in grounding this conversation in the issue of equity and social justice and how we use that intentional and deliberate strategy around leadership in order to make a difference in the students' lives that we serve.
How many people are nodding their head with that comment? Yeah. Yeah. Over here.
Good afternoon. I'm Linda Fontanella, the Vice President of Student Services for Irvine Valley College and the President of the Chief Student Services Officers. At this table, it was like being at confession almost. We had a beautiful conversation. Some of us said that we were here for selfish reasons, to really learn more about a new system, because some of our members have only been in the system for 18 months. Others of us have served in the system for many years. We felt like we were very fortunate being in the California Community College system at this time, because we've never seen so many great initiatives before us for helping students. But we know in order to make those initiatives count for student success and meet the goals of the strategic vision, we have a lot more work to do. And leadership is at, as you said, many different levels at our college, and we wear many different hats. And so we want to learn how to lead the college at many different levels, and that's what we hope to walk away from today.
Nice. Great. Okay, a couple more? Yeah. I see a hand back here. Do I see a hand over here? I just want to make sure we get lots of different voices in the room.
I'm Matt Wedstein from Delta College, and one of the themes that was talked about at our table in having an interest in being here is that with all of the initiatives that are being implemented, like Guided Pathways and others, there's always a sense of fear and some resistance and some barriers that come up within the institutions, and that there's a need to figure out the strategies to get around those fears and resistance. So, thank you.
So we begin to talk about leadership specifically. How do I lead from where I am? How do I integrate empathy? What does it mean to be a leader in times of fear or unrest? What does it mean to lead in times of uncertainty and lots of change happening all at the same time that has both opportunity and maybe some sense of greater resistance because people don't know where to go with that? Lots of good questions. Got one more hand over here. I'll see if there's any other hands. Okay, we'll kind of wrap up with this hand over here.
Perfect. My name is Jeremiah. I'm from the College of San Mateo, where I am the Director of Equity. And so I'm interested, because thus far we've talked about, not in any depth yet, leadership. And people keep identifying leadership and the concomitant leadership skills that they want to be exposed to in this space. But my question is, lead to what? What are we leading to? If we don't have that conversation, I don't think that it matters what type of new best practices we talk about. We have to determine where we're trying to lead to. And I think that should be the focal point of the conversation, at least amongst the teams tomorrow. So it's just my comment, not my question.
That's great. I saw some clapping hands around. Just a few little, yes, 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 yes. Good comment. So thank you for that. Okay, if we can move to the slides, I'm going to just kind of finish framing up the conference, and then we'll at least begin the conversation about where we're headed with Chancellor Oakley's introductory remarks and some question and answer. So I just wanted to kind of remind everybody of the objectives. I'm going to whip through those pretty quickly. We did that already? Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about, as you think about where you enter and what you're doing here, what we have in common is this is something about leadership and leadership development. And I want to talk a little bit about different kinds of leadership learning and hope you can find yourself on this map and then think about what else is available in our conversation today. So at the first level, leadership learning is really about skill acquisition. It's about becoming competent. It's about figuring out what it is that I need to do to be able to do whatever this leadership thing is. So lots of times you'll hear people say, I need the skills and tools to be able to go out and do this thing called guided pathways, do this thing called when you merged your categorical grant funding, I need to go out and I figure I need to know, what are the steps? These are the leadership books that say the 8 steps to, right? These are concrete skills and tools. And they're important. They're very important. So this is the first part of leadership development. The second part of leadership development is the need for role performance. And that has to do with where you sit and how you influence people. And becoming clear about, well, how do I influence and find my voice and figure out how I'm effective kind of from where I sit. People who may have been doing a formal role often get leadership training about what does it mean to be a supervisor? What does it mean to be a CEO? What are the typical, a president, what are the typical pitfalls that we have in those various ideas and positions of leadership? And that is role performance. Often, we pay a little less attention to the need for new mental models or capacity building. So competence is the ability to do what I need to do. Effectiveness is to be able to do it within the organization I'm in and from wherever I sit. Mental models is really to think about, how do I think about leadership? And we all have a mental model for leadership. You've watched television programs, you've watched TV, you've read books. You've been part of a society that loves leadership, has all kinds of models for leadership. So we all start with an assumption about what it means, and therefore what it means for me and where I sit. Our work together is going to build on all 3 of these. Most importantly, we're going to be talking about mental models, how do we think about leadership, and building skills and competence, beginning to build skills and competence within what may be new or alternative mental models. So we'll talk about traditional mental models of leadership and some newer mental models of leadership. And so what does it mean? Where do I find myself? How do I think about leadership? How do I want to think about leadership? And what are the skills that enable me to enact that and work with that every day? Many of us think of leadership in this particular way. See if you find yourself in that. What we do leads to some particular outcomes or consequences. And when I'm not getting the outcomes that I want, whether we've agreed to them or whether I've just made them up myself, either way, I kind of think, what do I need to do? What actions do I need to take to get the results that I want? You see that? That's called single loop learning. I'm doing something, I see I don't get what I want, so I do something different, assuming I'll get something different. And this works for problem solving. It's a great strategy, there's nothing wrong with it. It makes a lot of sense until I begin to keep getting what I didn't. I'm kind of getting, that's not working. I keep trying new things, and I keep running up against some of the same problems. That leads to a different kind of learning, which is more around mental models and capacity, which says, what are the governing variables or mindsets that lead me to act in certain ways, assuming I'm going to get certain outcomes? The best way to think about this is a thermostat. How many of you have seen this conversation before? Great. So friends in the audience, somewhat people think of this as a thermostat. The first one is the thermostat, the old kind of thermostat. Well, it's just a regular thermostat. Whereas I set my thermostat to the degree that I want. I want it to be 73 degrees. And when we're not at 73 degrees, the air conditioning kicks on, or the heat kicks on, and moves us back to 73 degrees. This is what the thermostat never does. Why is it set at 73 degrees? Should we be at 73 degrees? It seems like it's warmer outside today. Would you like it to be cooler inside? Would you like it to be warmer? I noticed you have a fire going. Perhaps we should turn the heat on, right? We don't have a thermostat that thinks, it just, or questions the fundamental assumption of 73 degrees. That is called double loop learning. where we say, not only what do I do in hopes that I'm going to get something, but how am I thinking about what I'm doing that's going to get me something? And that's what we're going to ask you to do today and through our time together, is think about what to do to get what you want in some new ways or to get where you're headed, but also to think about how am I thinking about what I do to get to where I want to go. So both opportunities will be available. And it is, if you just focused on one, on walking away with tools, you may miss what is some of the potential mental models that change how we go about things. And by thinking about that together, we can see how to use items a little bit differently. Sometimes I like to say, their skills are great to develop, but sometimes I'll use the same skill a little differently if my mental model changes. So I may use the same screwdriver, but how I use it and where I use it and what I'm trying to accomplish shifts when my mental models changes. Over time, mental models and mindsets tend to become more inclusive. They tend to become broader. The capacity to hold multiple opinions and perspectives at the same time happens when we pay attention to our mental models. So this then is double loop learning, and the goal is to expand your mindset. So let's talk for a moment about the agenda highlights, as I talked a little bit about earlier. We'll have a couple speakers. Chancellor Oakley's with us. We're going to turn it over to him in just a moment to talk about, from his perspective, where we're going, what he sees, why he took this position, what he's attempting to accomplish, and how he sees change leadership, and how he's worked around change and through change in his own experiences. Now, you may want to think right from the beginning, start thinking about it now, start thinking about it as he's talking. Think about, what do you want to know? This comment over here about where are we going, this is our opportunity to have some of that conversation. So he has said very clearly, I welcome questions. We're leaving lots of time for questions. So as he's speaking, as you think about what you've always wanted to ask him in front of 300 of your closest friends and colleagues, put your hand up, and this is your opportunity to kind of lean in and have some conversation about where we're headed and what that looks like. Did you hear that feedback? I'm trying to get rid of it, so let me know if it goes away. John Kenya will be with us here tomorrow. He's going to introduce a very particular mindset of leadership that's called system leadership. So listen for how he's thinking about leadership and how that's different from some of our traditional mindsets. How does it fit the way you work at your colleges and how it might be different? And then he'll be talking about some skills and tools. So our goal is to focus on collective system leadership. Throughout our time together, we'll be talking about mindsets and toolkits. Both are going to be really important as they support change at your local level. And we will have, throughout our time together, a mixture of opportunity for self-reflection, team time, and all summit participant conversations. And we invite you to join with us in that in all three levels so that we're working on accomplishing and building strength at all three levels of leadership learning. With that, I'm going to turn us over to Laura Hope, who's going to introduce us to Chancellor Oakley.
So I'm really glad we got the question out about where we're going, because I think the question about where we're going is a critical one, one that Chancellor Oakley outlines for us in the Vision for Success that the Chancellor's Office recently published. I think another question that we need to consider is, who are we becoming? And who do we need to be in order for us to do our very best for students? Some of you have probably heard Chancellor Oakley speak recently about how lucky he is that he went to the community college. And a lot of us, how many of you went to a community college? A lot of us were lucky too. But I think we're in fact the lucky ones because we are led by a person who has an overarching commitment to social justice, to our system, and to our students. So with that, I'd like to introduce our Chancellor, Eloy Ortiz Oakley.
Can you hear me? Perfect. Okay, so thank you, Laura. Thank you, everybody, for the invitation. Always nice to be back in Southern California. especially after spending most of the week in Washington, D.C. So I'm tired, I'm grumpy, so there's no filter. So be prepared. Which, those of you who know me, will not be a surprise. I don't think there's ever a filter. But there's even less of a filter right now. Thank you all for being here. I mean, it says something other than you want to escape your own colleges. It says something about you wanting to be here, to actually engage and participate, share your thinking, and put yourself out there as leaders. So I'm going to just give you a few thoughts based on what I heard you say, give you a few thoughts about where I think we are, and then I'm going to talk about the vision for success and why we put it together, what it means. And, you know, at the end of the day, it's just a document, okay? But I will try to give you a sense for why we think the document is important. So, you know, since I just got back from D.C., I do want to tell you a few things that I came back with from that trip. And, you know, I've been to that town a lot, and certainly a lot has changed. But underlying all that change, it's wonderful to walk into rooms throughout the Capitol and have people recognize how important the system that I represent is to the nation. And I don't say that just to make us feel good about ourselves. I say that because there is a lot of expectation that we are going to provide the leadership necessary in order for our nation to move forward, at least as it relates to providing skills, opportunity, education to individuals who need it the most today. And for us to be able to demonstrate that we can, as a public institution, educate a populace in a way that allows them to meaningfully participate in this economy. There is an expectation that we're going to do it. And there's a realization that the rest of the country needs to listen and pay attention to what's going on in California. Why? Because we are the place. We are the place where we truly believe that we can be diverse and that we can be prosperous. It is possible in California. And so there's a lot of hope. And I know that's a word that's been overused over the last 8-9 years, but there is a lot of hope about what you all are going to accomplish. So, with that in mind, let me talk a little bit about where I think we are at. And first, let me begin by saying thank you to all of you who have participated in giving us feedback at the Chancellor's office, who have gone out every single day and provided the support our students need to be successful, who have defended day in and day out the rights of every single student to participate in our colleges and universities, who have raised your voice in support of our students and against the crazy notion that a person could actually be illegal on our campuses. There is no such thing. And I say that because there are still some people who believe that. Some people in our state, there are people in our colleges who believe that. And so we've got a lot of work to do. And so this is why I think opportunities like this are important. Because leadership doesn't happen in one session, at one conference, at a table. You know, it's kind of funny how we're organized as not just as a system, but as humans. I mean, I can't tell you how many conferences I go to on any given week and any given year. If I had a penny for every badge I had, I'd be a rich person. But this is the way we organize ourselves. We bring ourselves together to talk to one another, to think about issues, and we have all these different opportunities to learn or to talk about different aspects. But you know, at the end of the day, it's really quite simple. It's just about how do we organize ourselves in a way that provides the greatest amount of opportunity to the people that we're serving. It's really that simple. And so to the question of where are we going, what is the vision? It's really a simple vision. We don't need to overcomplicate this. We do our best to make it complicated. We have a whole history of making it complicated. Okay? If we just step back sometimes and look at the system that we all have been part of creating, we have done our best to complicate it. We have all sorts of categories for the learning that we deliver, non-credit, for credit, not for credit. We have all sorts of ways that we categorize our students. We have all sorts of ways that we have to count our students. And I realize that a lot of this structure is things that we inherited when we came into college or when we began work at a college or a university. But this is a moment where we have to take a step back and question the underlying assumptions as to how we're organized. And so that is what's going to make this challenge so difficult for us, because it's hard. If it was easy, we wouldn't be talking about this. And that's not to say that we haven't tried to do something about this over the years. I mean, every year that I've been in the system, and I'm starting to forget how many years, every conference I've gone to, we come out of there saying, we're going to improve student success. And every year I come back, I see the same data over and over and over and over again. And you're not unique. You know, I have the privilege of sitting on the Board of Regents for the University of California. And as smart as they believe that they are, and they are pretty smart people, but they believe they're smarter than they are. And I say that as a member of the University of California. They have not done much better than we have. They have not done much better. They just have the opportunity to serve a segment of the population that for some of them, even without any help, they would be successful. We get the privilege of serving everybody else. So these issues aren't unique to us. I mean, I have been all across the country talking to people all across the country, as many of you have. These are not unique challenges. And in 114 colleges, yes, there are 114 different unique flavors, but there is the same fundamental problem. So I caution us from always thinking, well, you know, at my college, things are so different that none of this other stuff we're talking about could possibly work here. Well, let me tell you, there are some things that are just fundamental to the way students learn. Low-income students, students of color, first-generation students, there are some commonalities, whether you're at Georgia State, whether you're at Valencia College, or whether you're at Long Beach City College. And I'll pick on my old college, because I see some of my colleagues here, although Long Beach City College is not represented, but there are many graduates of Long Beach City College here. So yes, we need to continue to honor the 114 different flavors of what it means to be in a community and what that community needs, but we have to embrace that we also are one system serving the state of California, and there is an expectation that we're going to come together, we're going to look at practices that can be scaled across all 14 colleges, we're going to put an emphasis on equity, we're going to do everything we can, and we will close the equity gaps. How many of you, well, first of all, I hope you all have read this by now. But how many of you, when you saw the goal that we are going to close the equity gaps in 10 years, thought to yourself, there is no way we can do that? How many of you thought that? There's a few brave people here. Yes. Yes. And you know, we had that internal debate amongst ourselves and with our partners in the Chancellor's office. You know what? At the end of the day, what I want you to think about is if we don't believe that that gap could be closed, how can we look in the eyes of every student that comes on campus and believe that they're going to succeed? Think about that. Think about how your own belief system is reflected on the students that you serve. I mean, what are you going to do? As they come on campus, you're going to think to yourself, well, that guy's going to succeed. She's not. He is. No, we can't believe that. We have to believe that we can do it. It's the only belief structure we should consider. So, what is leadership in the context of what I'm talking about? Leadership isn't something that is just for the chancellor or for the college president or for the academic senate president. You know, those are positions that require leadership to be demonstrated, but those aren't leaders per se, just because of their position. And by the way, being a manager doesn't mean that you're a leader. Management is something very different than leadership. Okay, we can manage the status quo. We've been doing a pretty damn good job of that. But we need to lead through the status quo. We need to transform the status quo. And that's why we're talking about leadership. So, to me, leadership means that each and every one of you, when you're faced with an opportunity to move an issue forward, to move an agenda forward, to raise your hand and say, no, this is not working, or yes, this is something we should support, or you have the opportunity to influence someone and move them in a direction that's aligned with the direction that we're going, and I'll talk a little bit about that direction in a minute. That's leadership. It's having courage to step up, and in a committee where everybody you know, or at least you believe, is going in the wrong direction, you have the courage to raise your hand and say, yes, but have we considered this? Or yes, but, you know, we are missing the forest for the trees. That's leadership. It's having the willingness to put yourself out there. And for some of us, when we get opportunities to be in positions that have great influence, leadership also means being willing to lose your job to move the agenda. So people have asked me, why have I taken this position? I didn't take it because it paid me more. I didn't take it because it's going to provide me a greater retirement. I took it because I believe in what you all do. I believe in the power that's in this room. I believe in our students. I believe that we can transform this system. And I believe that we can lead the way, not only in the state of California, but throughout the country. I believe that we have everything it takes to get that done. And we live in a moment in time when that is not only possible, but it's necessary. It is necessary. I believe that. That is what gets me up every single morning. I believe that we've been handed a great opportunity in the California community colleges to really show that we can transform a system. Now, there are people in the country, and I have spent a lot of time with them on, I've been on all sorts of committees or task forces that are looking at the future of work in America. There are some people who do believe that no matter what we do in this room, It's not going to make a difference in the long run. What's going to make a difference is that we are going to be swept away by the changes that are coming, and that our jobs will be irrelevant in the near future. I don't believe that. I do believe that our lives will be transformed through technology, through advances, but I don't believe that those changes can or should happen without us. I think we can make those changes. So it really gets down to the kind of transformation that you're going to be talking about here today. And that transformation can only take place, not if somebody else does it, but if you do it as individuals, every single day, every time you go to work, whether you face a student in the parking lot, whether you're sitting in a committee meeting, whether you're talking to one of your colleagues, every day you have opportunities to lead. It's you who make that choice. Will you choose when you walk out of here to take every single one of those opportunities? Will you choose to put yourself out there? Will you choose to make a difference? It's a choice. And yes, you're going to talk about skills and ways of thinking about leadership. But at the end of the day, you can read 100 books on leadership. It comes down to a choice you make every single day. We are not going to get to the world that I believe you all believe we should be living in without sacrifice, without intentionality, without persistence and consistency in the direction that we're trying to go. We are not going to make the change in 1 year or in 2 years or even in 3 years. The only way we're going to see the change we want to see is to lean into this over the next 10, 15, 20 years. That's how stubborn the problem is. So, will you begin that journey? Is what I need you to think about today. Will you, as individuals, not to take back to your colleges and tell other leaders what you learned and how they should lead, but what are you going to do? Okay? It's not just the academic senate president or the union president or the college president that's going to make this happen. It's you. And my job is to try to create an environment where you can make that happen. My job and my hope is that through the actions of the Chancellor's Office, that we create an ecosystem, create a vision, and create a framework that allows you to operate in that way to make those changes. I'm not here to tell you how to make those changes. I mean, I'd be happy to tell you what I think. But I'm not at the college. Chancellor's Office doesn't graduate students. You do. So, let me talk about the vision for success for a bit, and now I want to make sure I spend plenty of time answering your questions. So, I've heard today that we're tired of initiatives. I've heard today that we're not sure where we're going. First, let me begin by saying that there are no initiatives in this document. Okay? There are no initiatives. So maybe we've gotten so used to framing everything that we talk about as another initiative. But there's only one vision in here, and that's to transform our colleges, and all we've tried to do is provide a framework and a direction. When we talk about guided pathways, we talk about it as a framework, as a way to frame activities, not as an initiative. An initiative is something that you do discreetly or something that you do apart from what you normally do in your daily business. A framework is how you do your business, all of your business, how you spend $8.6 billion. We have $8.6 billion to provide equity for every student? Are we going to use every single one of those pennies in pursuit of equity? That's a question. So what we try to do in this document, and there are lots of different frameworks, there are some colleges that are Achieving the Dream colleges. How many of you are an Achieving the Dream college? Great. There are some colleges here that have College Promise programs. Raise your hand, College Promise programs, all right. There are some colleges that have entered into all sorts of other initiatives or frameworks. At the end of the day, whether you're talking about Achieving the Dream or a College Promise, it all comes down to the same thing. How do you use the information you have, data you have, about your students, about your community? How do you organize that information? How do you question that information? How do you react to that information? How do you make changes on your campus and align your practices, the way you schedule classes, around what you are determining are the needs of your students in your community? That's all it is. Okay? The founders of Achieving the Dream or College Promise, we're all talking about the same thing, or guided pathways. It's just a framework. Because as humans, we need a frame to think about how we're going to organize ourselves, how we're going to have a common set of words or common set of looking at the problem. Guided pathways is just a framework that provides us a way of looking at the challenges on our campuses and having the same discussions, whether you're in LA or College of the Siskiyous, about how we better serve the students that are in our college or the community that we serve. And then how do we act on that information? And what kind of questions we should be asking. That's what it is. You are the initiative. You, in the way that you use that framework, are the initiative. And I don't care what you use within that framework to get the job done. That's up to you. That's where the 114 flavors come in. Okay? We are going to try to provide a frame for you. We're going to try to be very clear about what we expect you to accomplish. But the rest is up to you. And how you organize yourselves within that framework to deal with the challenges of your community will be up to you. Is up to you. That's not where I expect my team to get into your soup. I was at a single college district for many, many, many years. I didn't want anybody telling me what to do at Long Beach. But I did appreciate when the chancellor would give us some clarity around where we need to go. And some clarity about how we should organize ourselves or how the funding is going to be used. So that's essentially what we're trying to do. That's what the strategic vision is all about. Trying to be clear as possible. And I've already heard from some people, well, that wasn't clear enough. You don't talk specifically about race in this document. You haven't done this or you haven't done that. But you know what? I'll be as clear as I can be. Whether you're at College of the Siskiyous or Southwestern College in Chula Vista, you need to look at your community and figure out how you're serving the people of your community. And my expectation is that you are not going to have an equity gap between anybody who's in your community, period. Low income, high income, black, white, green, I don't care. It's about race, yes. It's about ethnicity, yes. It's about income, social economic levels, yes. Yes. And this is about social justice for everyone in our community. So that is the expectation. So how are we going to react to that as a chancellor's office? My expectation is we're going to do everything possible to align every resource that we have behind what we're trying to do here. Because at the end of the day, unless the resources are aligned, then again, we don't really believe what's in this document. So this is not going to be easy. This is going to be hard. We're going to be challenged over and over and over again. Because to say that we need to go in a different direction sometimes to some people means either A, the direction that I've been working in is not meaningful, or my job has to change, or the program that I have defended for the last 30 years may have to change. And it's yes to all of those things. It's yes to all of those things. Because if we look at our data today, and we should look at it with our eyes wide open and not be critical of ourselves in total, because 99.9% of all of you and everyone who comes to work at our community colleges comes to work for one sole purpose: to improve the lives of everybody on that college. I won't talk about the 0.1%, but you know who they are. I will talk about the 99.9%. Everyone does. So it's not us as individuals who are necessarily at fault. It's the way that we've organized our colleges, the ways that we've set up incentives through either our funding mechanisms or our regulatory framework or our statutory framework. So we need to begin to unwind all that. And so that's going to be our role in the Chancellor's office, to work with you, to hear from you, to figure out how we can begin to either unwind or realign all those structures behind the work that we need to do. So none of this is going to happen overnight. It's going to be painful. But every time you feel pain on your campuses, every time you feel pain about the changes that are happening, I want you to think about the pain that many of your students are feeling. Okay? It's that pain we need to be focused on. The pain of the student having to go through all sorts of hoops, work 3 jobs, sleep in their car, not know where they're going to get their next meal, live in an economy that's unforgiving of them, that's changing in front of their eyes. They don't have STRs, they don't have PERS, they don't have benefits. Think about that pain. And let's focus on that pain, not our own pain. This is not about our institutions. This is not about our organization. It's about our students. So that's the message I want you to internalize. Okay? That's what we're trying to do. And that's what the vision of success tries to capture. And at the end of the day, all the ideas in this document came from you. From thousands of respondents who told us what is not working, what is working, what could work better, and what we really want to wake up and come to work for. And I know I share that with all of you. I come to work for our students. That's what we all come to work for. So let's put them at the center of everything that we do and understand that this journey is going to be a remarkable journey. It's going to be an important journey. And yes, sometimes it will be a difficult journey. But we have to get this done. On behalf of all of our students, we have to get this done. So, why don't we do this? Why don't I begin to take questions? And along the way, some of those questions may lead me onto soapboxes, so I want to leave time for that. So, let's open it up for questions and see what's on your mind.
Probably put them up high so the runners can see you. Got a question right here maybe to start? You're the only hand I see. There's a mic coming your way.
One of our newest leaders.
Thank you, Eloy. My question is, one of the roles that I think you've already demonstrated some skill and capacity in is being a leader for public education in general. So I'd like to describe your approach to working with your counterparts in the UC and CSU system.
Sure. So, I mean, first of all, understand that our other systems, other partners, whether it's K-12, CSU, or the UC, and to even a great extent the private nonprofit sector, are all struggling with this question as well. Different variations. And so I've always made it a point to engage with our partners in the other systems. I've had great opportunity to do that. Certainly my experience at Long Beach has stamped in my mind that we as a community college cannot be successful unless our K-12 system is successful, unless our CSU system is successful, and the University of California system is successful. So within that framework, how do we work together to ensure the success of more Californians? So that's a message I carry every chance that I get, whether I'm sitting at a board meeting for the Regents or whether I'm talking privately to Janet Napolitano or Tim White or whoever, or Tom Torlakson. And so the way that we've done this formally as the Chancellor's Office is, first we set up a joint committee of the State Board of Education and the California Community College Board of Governors to look at primarily career technical education, but more broadly blurring the lines between K-12 and community college. And so they're doing that work. We have a formal opportunity to bring both the Executive Committee of the Chancellor's Office and the Executive Committee of the California Department of Education together on a regular basis to have conversations. We're having great conversations on a common data system right now. That's something that I'm going to push to the very end. We have formal opportunities to meet with the CSU executive team. Our executive team in the Chancellor's Office just recently met with Tim White's executive team to have conversations for everything from the associate's degree for transfer to baccalaureates to everything that's going on, teacher credentialing. There's a whole host of issues we have to talk about. And of course, and just actually, where am I here? Yes, last week, and some of you may have been there, we organized a meeting with the leadership of UC Santa Cruz, with all of the community colleges that feed transfers into UC Santa Cruz, to have a specific conversation about how we increase transfer to UC Santa Cruz. We're also going to have the same conversation with UC Riverside. Why? Because one of the successes that we've had in working with the UC is there is a regental, yes, that is a word, there is a regental policy that commits the UC to having a 2-to-1 ratio. For every 2 undergraduates, freshman undergraduates, we will admit 1 transfer student. And so UC Santa Cruz and UC Riverside have not met that number yet, and they have their own reasons why. So we're going to convene groups to help meet that requirement. So there's a lot of work that's happening. Fortunately, that work is usually 99% of the time welcomed. We had a few hiccups over algebra prerequisites, but we've gotten over that, I think. But I think it's a good relationship. But even in good relationships, you have to put pressure on the relationship. The only way we're going to get true change is to continue to put pressure and to not look at it as personal. I expect UC and CSU to put pressure on us, and they do. I have met with all the enrollment folks at UC, and they tell me time and time again, Chancellor, your system is not producing enough transfer-ready individuals for us to get the yield that we need in order to get to a 2-to-1 ratio. Of course, I push back and say, well, how exactly do you measure transfer ready? But that's a necessary conversation. And as I've communicated to some of the CEOs, it's something we need to really think about, which, by the way, as I said, once you give me a question, I get on a soapbox. In this document, a lot of people have asked me, why do you say the goal is to increase transfer by 35% annually? And for those of you who didn't pick up on it, I didn't say transfer readiness. I said transfer. That puts the onus on us to make sure that our students not only get to the door, but walk through the door. That puts the onus on me to continue to pressure the Department of Finance, the CSU, the UC, all of our partners to accept more transfers. We need to take responsibility for our students. It doesn't become somebody else's responsibility once we've washed our hands and said, we're done. It forces us to question whether or not we have really prepared enough students for transfer. So it is not just about transfer readiness, and I will preview some of my pet peeves. I don't want to see in our scorecard transfer readiness anymore. I want to see transfer. The actual act of students getting to their destination. That's what I want us to measure. So, thanks for that question. Go ahead.
Chancellor Oakley, thank you so much for exhibiting your leadership in helping the State Chancellor's Office articulate a vision and some goals for the system. I think it's so important to answer the question, what do we all focus on to have that kind of leadership and to have that kind of a focus, besides what we do individually at our 114 colleges. So, and I also like the theme, the change in the emphasis and the interaction from the State Chancellor's Office back to the colleges. I think that's going to be very helpful with increased technical assistance and streamlining systems. You challenged us at the beginning of your comments to say, what will we do differently when we go back home as individuals? And a lot of the comments, including yours today, are about systemic change, organizational change, and of course that's important.
Right.
What do you have in mind for us to catch in terms of the spirit or whatever here that we would do differently as individuals going back?
Well, that's a great question, and sometimes we can think about what those opportunities will be. Sometimes you don't know what those opportunities will be until you're faced with that opportunity. But so in general, I mean, when we get back, how do we question the data that's in front of us? How do we carry those conversations forward? How do we, when we are either in a hiring committee, whether we are in a shared governance committee, a planning committee, are we taking the opportunity that's presented to us to move us in the direction of closing the equity gap, of highlighting an issue that that you as an individual at that moment in time can clearly see this is a question of equity, and perhaps we're not talking about it in the way that we should. Perhaps we're just giving it the lip service that we have for years. But to really, really question it, and to question the underlying assumption that led us to this particular data point. I'm going to try my best to give you things to talk about on your campus. I'm going to try to cause controversy from time to time. I didn't realize that algebra was something that could cause so much controversy, but I've been corrected. I got the most hate mail I've ever received, and my friends from Long Beach know that I've gotten my share of hate mail. But algebra really, really touched a nerve in this country. But take those opportunities to really question that. And again, as I mentioned to everyone who assumed what I was saying when I said that, in California we want to look for alternative math pathways. What we're not saying is that we should change requirements for brown or black or poor students. What we're saying is that we need meaningful requirements that we know from data lead to better learning or better skill acquisition or better application of skills? Those are the questions we need to ask, not just make an assumption that just because we've had this requirement for 100 years, how do we know it matters? We just assume that the people before us knew what they were doing. And we didn't even have it for 100 years. Thank you. But we've had this organizing mechanism for forever that leads us to believe. And maybe, just maybe, one of the reasons we have some of these requirements, and I'm not saying we do, but it should be a question. Are we just purposely excluding people? And how do we know that we're not? But these are fundamental assumptions that you as individuals can question. And I'm not saying that you'll be popular. I never said that. Although talking about algebra tends to be, a good cocktail party discussion. But you're going to be sometimes looked at, it's like, why are you even raising this question? And you know what? It may not stick the first time. It may not stick the 20th time. But maybe the 21st time, somebody will actually say, hey, you know what? I was just looking at data the other day that John Hetz showed me, and maybe you are right. That's the leadership that I want you as individuals to exhibit every single day whenever that opportunity arises.
Right here, and then we'll go number 2 over here. Hi, thank you for that. Charlie Ng from Maricosta College. Wanted to know your thoughts on, you've given this explanation about the Chancellor's Office trying to provide the environment and the framework for the colleges, and I'm wondering, has the Chancellor's Office identified sort of a list of things that they're looking to accomplish in that area? So I'm thinking of how you might be able to influence Ed Code, Title V. Those are all frameworks that we must operate under. We have things that we're looking for toward maybe EEO or maybe funding formulas or 50% law issues, a lot of different things that may actually unintended have negative impacts on our ability to achieve closing the equity gap. And I don't know who's paying attention to that. So just wanted to know your thoughts on how that can happen. If the goal is 10 years for closing equity gaps, then I would imagine that trying to fix Ed Code on Title V would have to happen before that.
So I think that's a great question. And please don't take some of my answers as an attack on your question, but as an opportunity to push back on some underlying assumptions of your question. Because I hear this a lot the entire time I've been in the system. There is always some other reason why we can't do what we're not doing. There is some other reason why we have the outcomes that we do. And yes, all those issues you brought up, there are unintended consequences. But for each and every one of those issues, there was a reason why we created the 50% law. There was a reason why AB 1725 was passed into law. There were reasons, and those were well-intended reasons. I can't think of a law that is overtly discriminatory in California. There may be a few from the past, but not any recent Ed Code requirements. But we know now from the data that perhaps they're not doing what was intended to happen, or perhaps the expectations for our colleges are very different today than they were 20 years ago or 25 years ago. The expectations today are that it is not enough to go to college. It is not enough to go to community college. There was an expectation maybe 25 years ago that was in and of itself a great thing. And guess what, folks? We accomplished that goal. We have more access than any other state in the nation. That's a great thing. And we should celebrate that every day. And every time I talk, I have the great pleasure of saying that we serve the top 100% of students in California. That is a great thing. And so all of those regulations or ed code requirements have led us to this point. Question for us is, now what? Now that we know what's happening at our colleges, how do we reorganize ourselves? So to try and answer your question, first, yes, we are building capacity to look at all of those regulations and ed code requirements. Am I going to tell you which ones? No. Because as soon as I mention one, I'm going to get 100 emails tomorrow about all the reasons why I shouldn't even be talking about this. Because in a vacuum, if I just say, oh yes, we're going to change the 50% law, in a vacuum, that that undermines what some people believe is a fundamental principle in how we should allocate resources. And, and I agree with my faculty colleagues that, there was a time in our history where we weren't allocating every penny to support the classroom. But in a vacuum, that's problematic. But what we need to do as a chancellor's office is show a comprehensive package of reforms that are possible to achieve the outcomes that we want to see. Because if we just walk into the legislature and say, we're going to change the 50% law, why? And what are we doing in place of it? Or how are we going to hold the colleges accountable? So this is going to be a stepwise effort. When we have opportunities to make changes that clearly align with the direction that we're going and people understand why we're doing it, we're going to push forward. In the meantime, we're going to try to gather and educate and bring folks together around, what do we really believe we need to accomplish and what things do we need to question in order to accomplish that and find opportunities. So yes, you're right, and that is a function that the Chancellor's Office can and will be doing. Some of you have given me lots of input on what regulations need to change, everything from financial aid to the 50% law and everything in between. And so the last thing I'd say about that is, if you wait for Sacramento to make all these changes, then we will never get to our goals. So this is where, we want to create an environment where even if some of these large systemic issues cannot be changed or reorganized or the incentives redone in the near term, there are things that you can do each and every day with the authority that you have on your college campuses to move us further along. And so there's an expectation of me and my team of what we need to do, and there's an expectation of you and your team of what you need to do. And only together will we get this done. And by the way, just because we say we have to close the equity gap in 10 years doesn't mean we have to wait 10 years. I would love to be able to do that in 5 years. So thanks for that question.
Well, sorry. Chancellor, you spoke a bit about transfer. I was wondering if you would address CTE and just
Sure.
basically and specifically whether or not, it seems often to me as a CTE instructor, and I'm head of certain CTE areas in my college, it often seems very reactive instead of proactive. And I'm wondering if you feel there's room, or it's within our mission in community colleges to innovate and plan and design programs that may be very unique.
So again, this is, you guys have planted all the right questions, because this is another one of my pet peeves. Just by the nature of you saying that you are a CTE faculty means that we have divided ourselves into camps of learning. What person comes to our colleges not wanting to improve their career opportunities? Okay, everything we do is career education. Everything. And so, we've created this paradigm that students who are just looking for a career, you go to this part of the college. Students who are wanting something else, you go to this part of the college. Students who transfer, they don't transfer just so that they can say they went to Cal, although some of them do. But My daughter's one of them. But they go there, they transfer to have a better opportunity at economic and social mobility. Economic and social mobility is what we do. So we need to change the way we talk about what we do, because the way we talk about what we do today segregates what we do and creates competition on our campuses for what we do. And I realize that this is a very philosophical point I'm making, but words matter. We have to be very intentional about what we say that we do. We are about social and economic mobility. That is our fundamental mission. And everything that we do should be feeding into improving the social and economic mobility of our students. And yes, intentional career education is certainly one of those. Because we recognize in the Chancellor's Office that we still have to work within the vocabulary that we have, we pointed out in the strategic vision that we need to increase credential production and career education by at least 20%, with an emphasis on placing students into employment. That is something we have to do. But more broadly, where we're moving to is the notion of how do we measure the value that we create in 114 communities. How do we measure that value? And that value, to me, is social and economic mobility, as opposed to, when I was at Long Beach City College, we could ramp up credential production by 30%. But what does that credential production mean? And what does it matter? So we need to be looking at what do these credentials matter to our students, and how do they improve their lives, and particularly as it relates to social and economic mobility. And I realize that this is sort of an abstract idea, but think about it and internalize it. Why do we even have credentials? Why do we have degrees? Why do we have certificates? All that credential means is a way to package skills and learning that are happening on our campuses and communicate it to somebody else. That's all it means. So the credential alone doesn't matter. The opportunity that we're creating for the student through that credential is what matters. And so how do we reorganize our thinking in curriculum committees or in discussions about hiring or in everything we do? How are we measuring the value of the credentials that we are producing, and what does that mean? So in a community, maybe the greatest demand is for particular career education. Anybody here from Santa Ana College? Okay, then I can talk about you. The Board of Governors was just at Santa Ana College, and we met with this amazing welding instructor. This guy has a wait list through the roof. And the fact that he has a wait list makes you question, why? If there is such demand, if he has a 97% placement rate with a median salary of about $60,000 a year for his students, why aren't we questioning why? I want Santa Ana College to question why. And if we've got resources over here that are not producing those results, there should at least be a conversation of why don't we put enough resources over here where we are improving the lives of more individuals in that community. Now, within that learning, we should not create terminal degrees at the certificate or associate's level. So we want to make sure that there's enough learning that they can continue to stack credentials on top of credentials on their way to further learning. But we should have this discussion. What does our community really need? Are we talking about what they need, or are we talking about what we need? Are we talking about what we need to ensure that if I'm a dean, that I have enough resources in my department, and why do I even need the resources? Have I even questioned where those resources are going to? Or if I'm a department chair, am I only worried about making faculty load? And yes, those are all things that as managers we need to worry about, but that's not leadership. So we need to ask those questions. So thank you for allowing me the soapbox. Uh-oh, well, I only have 5 minutes left for a soapbox, so.
I'm not sure I know how to work the microphone. But my name is Melanie Dixon, and I represent Los Rios District. And I want to thank you for challenging the field to be reflective about our practice and, more importantly, being student-centered. I have the fortunate luxury of being a recipient of the Innovation Award and being able to do some regional work with our CSU partners. And so one of the things that I appreciated you just saying is that if we wait on Sacramento, we might not get things done. We should be moving. And so I hear rumblings in the field that the state chancellor's office is thinking of a student experience lifecycle tool. And my district is knee-deep in trying to RFP and identify a tool. So I wanted to get a little more insight from you about whether there is a timeline in mind, whether we should be freezing in our action until a decision comes out of your office. Thank you.
Well, again, innovation doesn't always require one person to figure out the best innovation. Our office, particularly Executive Vice Chancellor Von Quinn-Levin's operation, in partnership with our foundation, are working on a set of technology tools, from career exploration to all sorts of stuff, to better assist you as colleges getting that work done. So what I'd say to you is just, if you have an opportunity to have a conversation with our folks in Vaughn's shop, let them know what you're doing. But I think in general, unless there's something imminently coming out, I would encourage you to continue to experiment. And I think together we can find the best solution that works for the most students. But we are going to try to introduce as many technology tools for the field as possible. That doesn't mean that those technology tools are going to work for everybody in the field. So in your region, you may have a specific need and a specific innovation that works for you. I wouldn't try to undermine that. Okay, last question.
Hi, my name is Mustafa Popal. I'm from, I won't say this college name just in case my president doesn't like the comments. So.
I have a list right here, so don't worry. It's probably the last time I'll have an opportunity to speak to this many administrators, so I feel like I should share some of my thoughts or pose a question. Oftentimes we talk about closing the equity gap, and the way that we frame that is we're going to help students that come from experiences of inequity, help them get a degree and get better jobs. Is that enough to change the system that produces and reproduces social and economic inequity? So let me just make sure I understand your question. Are you saying that is that enough to change our system, or are you talking about the general system, the man and everybody?
The general system.
Okay.
The way that we were talking right now about education is we're going to get them degrees and better jobs.
Yes.
And that closes the equity gap.
So let me try to answer it as simply as possible. One, you need to do what you can do within the broader system. We have to do what we can do. And I believe that if we can do a better job of producing more individuals who have not been well represented in education or in higher education to be more represented, then that begins the wave of change for the broader system. If you just take, for an example, regardless of which side you're on the recent presidential election, and don't tell me if you're on the wrong side, but just kidding. Anybody here from Yosemite? No? Okay. I'm not saying which side's the right side or the wrong side. But no, what we've learned is that there is a fundamental breakdown in America, and that exists in California as well. And that is, you have a lot of individuals who no longer feel connected to the economy, who no longer feel that they have control over what's happening, the changes that are happening around them, whether that means changes in demography, changes in the economy, changes in the amount of information that's available. They feel disconnected. and a loss of control, where that before they were in more control over their destiny. At least they were led to believe they were in more control. And this is true in California as well. If you look at California, there are two distinct Californias. A California primarily on the coast that has higher wages, higher education attainment, and a California that's mostly inland, Central Valley, far north, that does not have the same opportunity. What is happening throughout the country can certainly happen in California if we're not careful. And so where we have a lever that we can actually move, because some of the levers, some of the levers we can protest about, we can complain about, we can vote against, but those are levers that are a little bit more farther removed from us. The lever that we have is education attainment. And I believe that that is a fundamental root to changing the nature of inequity throughout America. So use the lever that we have and use it as often as you can. And I believe that if we have a more educated community, wherever it is you serve, that community will be better off and begin to make the changes necessary for us to have a better state and a better nation. So I would just say, focus on what you have control over, and we have control over this issue. And let's take advantage of it. So thank you, guys. Conference, so.
He's not kidding. We're going to move into a break, but before we do that, I'd like you all to open your programs to a notes page at the very back. And I'd like you to think for a moment, to give you just a moment, to think about why you're here and what you just heard. What you just heard. And what is the most important question that was asked or that it leaves you with? What is the most important push that you just received? What do you want to make sure you hold on to as a goal of every single one of us as a leader in the room? So make a note to yourself. What is your question? What was the push that takes where you are and moves it just a little bit further? So take a moment and just make yourself a note about that so you can hold on to that. And I would encourage you to do that wherever you sit. You support the system, you're in a college, you're a consultant to somebody in the system. Transformational learning begins with a question, not with an answer. So let's hold on to those questions through the whole time we're together, certainly through the break and into the next half of the day. As soon as I'll give you just another minute. I see people writing. We'll take a break until 3:20. So listen for the chime. We'll come out and let you know, but we are on a break.
Never know how much I love you. Never know how much I care. Oh, how much I care. Oh, how much I care. Oh, how much I care.